Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of MRC University. Today, I am completely honored to have Jay and Lucy from Veteran Service Brands here with us. They're going to talk to us all about franchising. But before we get started, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. All right, Jay and Lucy, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm super excited to hear everything you have to say and information for the veterans about franchising. I want to start by just, you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then we're just going to start by, people that have never even thought about franchising, get that bug in their ear so they can start thinking about it. And then we're going to go all the way through to what to do once you've actually signed that paperwork. All right. So over to you, Jay, first. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So Jay Sperry, I started with Veteran Service Brands just almost exactly 2 years ago as an intern. I was retiring from the Marine Corps after 20 years. I was an infantryman originally, and then moved on to being a company first sergeant, and then just decided ultimately that my career in the Marine Corps was coming to an end, and I wanted to start something new and exciting. Had the opportunity to actually meet a franchisee within the franchise system before I even applied for the position, and then that actually kind of helped roll me right into the position. That franchisee introduced me to Jack, and ultimately, the company that I was working with was, very well immersed into the internship and skill bridge programs that they have available. And so, a friend on LinkedIn was just like, "Hey Jay, you should check this out." Finished my application, and here I am 2 years later as the COO of Veteran Service Brands. So
that's awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have you here. What about you, Lucy?
Hey, I'm Lucy. Joe's explanation was far more exciting than mine. I am a veteran Air Force spouse. My husband did 21 and a half years in the US Air Force. And my whole career has been in talent acquisition and recruiting up until about 9 months ago when I joined Veteran Service Brands. So I work in franchise development here, which is a very impressive explanation of I am the first point of contact when anybody wants to come and have a chat about the franchise opportunities we have on offer. And this is just a real marriage of my personal and professional lives. I love working with veterans. I've worked with veterans, military spouses, and transitioning service members over the last 5.5 years in the US. And I really enjoy talking to people about their potential opportunity within our portfolio of brands. So it's really great to be here. Thanks, Valerie.
Awesome. All right. So veterans transitioning into franchises. It sounds like once you start peeling it back, it sounds like it's almost like a perfect fit, right? What's that link? Like what makes it such a perfect opportunity?
Well, for me, I think it's a perfect opportunity because and again, I am not a veteran myself, but within the military, you have, or one has to follow orders, one has to follow a playbook, one has to follow direction, one has to follow, essentially. And that is what a franchise is all about. Franchises ultimately are building your own business, but collapsing time, accelerating your growth by learning from the mistakes that other people have made, the best practice that they put into place, and the growth that they have seen so that they can share what good looks like. And if you can follow that playbook, if you can follow that direction, ultimately, that is the path to success. And we have found that veterans are just the ultimate in following that. So that's why I think it's a great opportunity for those in the veteran space.
I would echo what Lucy said. I would also say that, it's one team, one fight, right? When you're talking about military, you're talking about veterans. When they transition out of the military, they never lose that sense of camaraderie, that sense of pride of being like, I'm going to help out fellow veterans, or I'm going to, give a hard time to an Air Force guy because he wasn't a Marine. That's okay. But at the end of the day, they transition, out of the service. They have those skills, that mindset of like, I can do just about anything and nothing is going to stop me, right? I'm going to continue to do what I need to do to be successful. And they have that drive. Now, when you have a team of 90 plus other veterans that are in the same community backing you, that's going to be great, right? It's never going to stop.
So a franchise, just basic information. It's what we all think of, right? The McDonald's, the Starbucks, all of those organizations, all those companies that we see, the same ones, they look the same everywhere in the US. So potentially they're owning their own business. It's just a part of, it's already in a well-known name, right? So how do you have any questions or like guidance for a veteran that's looking into like, hey, this might be a good opportunity? Where would they start their research?
They got to ask first, right? I think at the end of the day, it's just, hey, can you tell me? It's always free to ask the question. I think most folks don't understand that. They'll do research online, which is a good thing, but you should always reach out to the person that's going to give you the best information. Just signing the disclosure document and receiving it to review it is free information. You can do that with any franchise system. Now, I will echo that most franchise systems typically have brokers that work for them. We do not. However, we just have Lucy, and we have a team of friend dev specialists that talk to you, walk you through the process, and this is what it looks like. Brokers can be a little aggressive sometimes, and that's okay. Don't take that the wrong way. Basically, what it is they're just trying to get you into the system because they typically get a fee for their services. So anticipate that when you are asking those questions and you're, hey, can I see the FDD? Can I look at the item 19? Can I look this entire thing over so I can understand a little bit more about your system? That's okay, and be prepared for a little bit of a barrage of emails. That's okay as well. It's typical in the franchise space. But at the end of the day, you should also reach out to local franchisees. You should always ask them, hey, what is it like being a franchisee inside of the system? What are some lessons that you've learned? That's free information as well. They all should be, open-minded and say, hey, you know what? This is why I joined and this is what I like about it. And they also should be very open about, these are some things that I don't like. Right? So my recommendation to folks is always reach out, always ask the questions, find other people on LinkedIn that have done franchises and look outside of the franchise system that you're currently looking at. So if you wanted to be a parking lot scraper, yeah, it's okay to look at other franchise systems and ask them the questions is, hey, does this look like it would be a good idea? I'll let Lucy go now.
So if I was a veteran or a transitioning service member who didn't have any intel on franchises at all whatsoever, the first thing that we all do these days is we Google or we ChatGPT. I speak to a lot of people who have literally just Googled franchises for veterans and we come up. But if you were looking for a wide range of opportunity, that is a great place to start. And then what I would do is I would take those names, I would go into LinkedIn and I would search for the veterans within those organizations. There aren't many franchise opportunities or organizations that are solely and exclusive to veterans. So if you want to speak to other veterans who have made that leap and transitioned from the military into franchise opportunities, that's a really great way of doing it. In addition, there is an organization called VetFran, who is a support, counseling, education, and broker of franchises for veterans. And there is a lot of due diligence and research that you can do utilizing that organization. And the opportunity that they offer in terms of the counselor and the person who can guide or coach you through opportunities is awesome as well. So you really want to surround yourself with people who have walked a mile in your shoes previously in the military, not necessarily in the same branch as you, but understand your psyche, the camaraderie, where you've come from, and then have made the leap themselves. I would also suggest there are so many podcasts out there. So, pick a few of them on your iTunes or Spotify and start listening, because when I first started within this sphere, I learned so much about franchising in other different environments, not just the services and trades, through listening to those. And that piqued my interest in terms of questions to ask and things to consider that never would have crossed my mind otherwise. But I think the biggest piece of advice and the most sensible piece of advice I would share with somebody is to perform those informational interviews and ask the questions, because through those interviews, through those conversations, you are going to glean and ascertain information that you never even knew to ask or existed. And that will then spur your conversation and make you seem more articulate and intelligent within that conversation as you then have subsequent conversations.
Yes. So, and then once they've had these conversations, they've narrowed out, yes, I definitely want to get into the franchise business. and they've narrowed it down to which one, then what? Funding? How does that work?
Go ahead, Lucy. I'll let you go first this time.
Well, from my perspective, the information that I share with people is in terms of funding, we have a broker that we encourage and suggest for the first conversation. And I think that most franchise organizations will have a relationship with somebody in a similar vein. But once you have that conversation with that person, I would always recommend then taking that information and having subsequent conversations with other organizations that provide funding. So it might be your personal bank that does business loans. It might be another veteran banking or military banking institution. But you want to educate yourself in terms of the information you need to understand and the questions you need to ask. And there are multiple ways that you can be funded through this. So I'll mention the three most common ones that I see, and then Jay can pick up the rest from there. So the majority of the veterans or transitioning service members that connect with us utilize the SBA Express loan, which is the typical one and is really simple to navigate. It's probably the most common way to finance a franchise across all franchising, not just for veterans, because the SBA partially guarantees the loan, really reducing the risk. But there is a veteran tailored offering, which most of the time provides slightly more favorable terms and maybe a lower down payment for qualified veterans. Then there is also the ROBS program, which, if you are not familiar, is Rollover for Business Startups. It's a totally legal IRS structured method that lets you use your retirement fund, so like your 401k or your TSP, as an example, to finance your business or franchise without paying any early withdrawal penalties or taxes. So those are the two that I have worked with the most. People often borrow money from families. That's a third one as well. So those are the three that I have come across myself in terms of franchise development and management. What would you suggest, Jay?
I think one other thing that Lucy kind of touched on, just like family, but also the friends, right? You've spent a lot of your time in the service with other veterans that you've come close to. You both may have gotten out around the same time. You may have a friend that's still in, and a lot of our franchisees actually have partners in their business. So a lot of them, the veteran themselves is the 51% owner or more majority owner. And the minority owner is either one, not a veteran, a family member, or a close friend that they've had, for the last 10, 15 plus years, or a service member that they served with, and they share, the franchise system 50-50 together. So that's another option that's out there for the veterans.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the bottleneck, they're like, oh man, I can't quite get that threshold of being able to buy the vehicle, be able to buy the trailer, and then they bring a friend on or a partner. And that kind of opens up the operations in their business, right? Allows them to have a little bit more free time. But hey, you do invoicing, I'll do estimate. You can help me do some of the actual work and cuts down on costs for the business, which is nice as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I didn't even think about going in as a partnership into a franchise. So that's a great tip. And then what are the different? So I have also Googled and found out a very little bit about franchises. And I know that there's, buy-in, startup, royalty, all like several different types, several different types of fees. Could you kind of talk us through those?
I'll start with the FranDev perspective in terms of fees, and then you can take over from operations. So when it comes to setting yourself up as a franchise, the first thing that you need to consider is the franchise fee itself. And typically and ordinarily, it runs in the tens of thousands, maybe sort of as low as 50 or 60,000, up to the sky's the limit with some of the franchise operations, including Chick-fil-A. But that's the first thing to consider. The second element is the equipment that you will need to procure if you are going down the service or the trades-based route. Well, every route, essentially, but that's something to consider as well. Maybe you might need a vehicle or a trailer, so you'll be looking at that element. And then you want to consider that there are startup fees when it comes to setting up your LLC, insurances, uniform, and there's always miscellaneous and ancillary costs that are involved. But those are the big ones, essentially, from the buying the franchise from the offset. But then there are residual fees afterwards.
Yeah, and I think to carry on with it, when you look at the FDD, typical FDD has a disclosure of the lowest amount that you would have for cost of entry, and it have the generalized idea of the highest amount, depending on your preference of what kind of vehicle, what kind of equipment. To Lucy's point, clothing, things like that. And then also in that, you're going to have your monthly minimums. So typical franchise locations, no matter what, you're always going to have a monthly minimum threshold of what you're expected to pay as far as royalties. Now, for most franchises, what I've seen is the first year or two are waived. And then after year 2 and on, then you have monthly minimums that grow over time because they're expecting that your business over time is going to grow. And then you would also have your royalties. So now some franchise systems have a very set, you're paying a flat 10%, you're paying a flat 7%. And then other systems have tiered royalties where once you hit a certain money threshold, let's say 500,000, you're going to go from a 7% to a 6%. Another key thing to look out for is brand development. So there's always a brand development fund typically with the franchise system, seen anywhere from 4% all the way down to 1%. And I've also seen tier systems where it goes, let's say you start off, you don't pay anything in brand development for your first year or your first 6 months. And then after your first 6 months, it goes up to 0.5 or 1% and then scales up. Now, there are some franchise systems out there that also have a cap. What I mean by that is, let's say you're a franchisee that comes in the space and you absolutely rock it out of the park and you're making 3, 4, 5 million. Well, if you're paying a 2% brand development fee for that 5 million, that's a pretty hefty fee, right? So sometimes what they'll do is they'll tailor it back. Hey, once you hit a cap of $10,000, $20,000, like that's it. You're already making, you're pumping enough money back into the franchise system. And that money is typically used for trade shows and other, incentive items that you might think as far as in the franchise space. So sending folks within the franchise system to sales training, sending some of the franchisees to, mastermind sessions to help grow the franchise system, helping with the franchise advisory council, things like that. That's what you can typically expect with that fund.
Okay. So along with the franchises, there's usually a training plan and like additional training also related to the military. I see.
I would say what other thing is when you're buying your equipment and you're buying some of your other parts of your business, your vehicle, right? You're going to be able to put those on a different kind of loan, or a lot of franchise systems have exclusive, account access for franchisees. So what I mean by that is when you go to buy your equipment, you're going to get a discounted rate because that franchise system already buys enough equipment from that company every year to where you're not going to, let's say, $30,000 for a piece of equipment. You're probably going to pay closer to 20 or 18,000 because the business itself continues to put money into that company's pocket because they're buying machines and other equipment on a consistent basis at that reduced rate. So hopefully, as be one of the other questions, if I was a prospect as a franchisee, is like, what kind of discounts will I potentially get for equipment?
Yeah, that like you said, with large equipment, that could be a huge discount. Did you have something else?
Yeah, sorry. I think another question I would recommend and encourage people to ask is, what do I need to spend on a monthly basis for marketing? Because dependent on the franchise, that can wildly differ based on the need for marketing. If it's a hugely competitive brand, then you're probably going to have to spend a lot more on a monthly basis than if it's an operation that has minimal competition within your geography or your area. So that's definitely a question for consideration. Okay. And you want to know that because that's going to be a continuous budgetary line item that you're going to have to consider and have within your operating statement, your P&L thereon after.
Right. Okay. Very good. Good to know. So the process to get started, we started with doing the research, reaching out and asking people questions, finding out about either loans, different funding areas. What else would the process look like about starting a franchise?
From my perspective, I think it's incredibly important to talk to existing franchise partners within the brand that you are interested in, because you initially the conversations are always with the corporate team. They're with a broker or they're with a franchise developer who is going to want to sell the franchise to you. That is their role. That is their goal. They have targets and quotas and objectives. They are salespeople. So they're going to want to get you to come through the door. And they're going to tell you often what you want to hear in order to mechanize that. The people that you really want to have the conversations with are the boots on the ground, the people who are operating within that brand, within that environment already, to find out exactly what their perspective is. And I think it's really important to have a set of 3 or 4 questions that you can draft based on maybe this conversation today, or you can think for yourself and ask 5 or 6 franchise partners across the country, or consider maybe looking at territories that are similar to the environment that you will be working in. Maybe it's a metro area, or maybe it's more of a sort of out of town or suburban area. So take a look at the demographics and make sure that it matches where you are going to be, and ask them those questions and find out from them. As an example, I think a great question is, if you had your time again, would you still enter into an agreement and a relationship with this franchise organization? Because not necessarily their answer will be, what you want to hear, but it's about the way that they position it. It's about the pause before they answer. You can hear the non-verbal communication as well as the verbal in terms of whether they recognize the opportunity as a good one for somebody else coming in through the door. So that is something that I would encourage and suggest. What about you, Jay?
And if the opportunity is available, I would say ask about a ride along. What does a typical day in the life look like? Can I spend the day with you, just understanding what your business looks like, watching you sell, watching you, go to an actual job and, do what it is your trade is, and then see what the back end looks like. What is the invoice like? What's your net? I'm a net 30. Am I net 90? How often are you going to get paid? Right. Because a lot of the folks, they want to get into these franchise spaces and they want national accounts and they want to work for Amazon. They want to work for these big companies. But what they don't realize is typical Amazon and big companies are net 90, which means you're fronting a lot of that cash up right off the bat to get all the products and materials and paying your employees. And then the next thing you know, you're waiting 90 days for that money to come into your pocket. So just understanding some of the workflows and asking those deep questions within the business. I think that ride along is key if you can.
So what are some of those harder questions, harder conversations that they should really be digging into? Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
I think no matter what, you're going to have some franchisees within the space that are going to say, you know what, I probably would have done things differently. I probably would have, dove into my business more. I probably wouldn't have stayed with my full-time job before transitioning into my, franchise. We've noticed a lot of that. I think over the last few years, we've noticed some of our franchise locations, they come into it still working and, let's say, operating with a company, let's say Microsoft, right? They're still working with Microsoft, but they're doing the business on the side and haven't really been able to fully commit themselves into the business. And once they do take that step away and fully commit, they're off to the races. I mean, for the most part, right? So I think that's probably another thing you can hear.
One that I would encourage, it's not necessarily a hard question, but it's a really important one, is what is the culture like? And you're not necessarily going to say, hey, what's the culture like? That's definitely much more of a feel, but questions around that, because ultimately you are buying a small part of a much larger business. You're buying their toolkit, you're buying their box of tricks, you're buying everything that they have learned. How much have they learned? What do they know? What is the support going to be like when you've got a problem? You don't want to know what it's going to be like when everything's going well. You want to know, who's going to help you when you come across an obstacle or an objective, or you've got more business than you can handle, hopefully, and how that will be managed across the wider business, and who is going to be there to prop you up and support you. In terms of, if Jay mentioned about the cash flow piece, about the 90 days, sometimes there can be issues with suppliers not paying. How is that going to be resolved? Where, not necessarily who is going to do the job for you, but what resources can you offer and share with me in order for me to be able to find out the answers myself? So how supportive is that environment when you're in it, not just when they're trying to get you through the door?
Gotcha. And then what does that timeline look like? Like, how long does it take to truly, like, once you make the decision to, I'm an owner of a franchise?
It within our organization, it can be as short or as long as you want it to be. But I mean, I guess the shortest would be about 6 weeks in order for us to do everything methodically and as well as we would want to do it. However, that said, I think that's a very short period of time. And that doesn't give me, as a franchise developer, sufficient time to get to know you, a potential franchise partner or franchisee. And a lot of the onboarding and a lot of the way that we work, and I share this because you want to look at this at other organizations as well, is how do they develop a relationship with you up front? How candid are their answers? Do they give you, as much as you can ascertain, the real deal story, or do they tell you what they think you want to hear? Because ultimately, with a franchise opportunity and operation, you are spending a lot of your own money investing in yourself, but with an organization. And you want to know that they've got integrity. You want to know that they've got credibility in the marketplace. So you need to do your due diligence outside, but you need to build those relationships with the people that you're going to be operating with. So I think, from my perspective, knowing what I know, the minimum period that you would want to spend between first conversation and sign on the dotted line is around 3 months, I think, about 12 weeks, because that gives all parties time to really get a feel, get to know each other, and know that that new franchisee, that franchise partner, is going to be a great representative in the marketplace of the franchisor's brand, but equally they are going to be the home for you for the next 7 or 10 years, and you're going to want to get up in the morning and be part of that.
Okay. And then usually I guess it's just always different depending on what type of franchise it is. But then from, all right, I signed to doors open, is there kind of a
I would say
different
it's probably it's about the same, right? We can do it as soon as 6 weeks. We can do it over the course of 6 months. It comes down to really the person, like if they get it, do they want it? What's the capacity for them to jump right into it, right? And some of them are still working for their business or another business, and they're getting ready to transition, right? They're using the money that they've saved up over a period of time to invest in their own business. And so, hey, I just need, 9 weeks to be able to kind of step out of this business. I'll go to training. But for us, typically within the first, I would say 3 weeks to a month, they're off to training, right? So we set them up with whoever's conducting the training, where give them all the resources, like, hey, this is where you're going to be. These are the dates that you're going to get, over the course of, a 4 to 6 day period. And then you can expect after that your marketing is going to be turned on, your website's going to be on. Because there are a lot of things that happen, once you open a franchise. Once that initial franchise fee is paid, it's game on our side. We're turning on websites, we're turning on the marketing, we're having a warm handoff meeting between Lucy and the operations side. Hey, you've worked with Lucy and Craig and the rest of the team on the Fran Dev side for the last 6 weeks to 6 months. Now you get to work with us for the next 6 weeks to 6 months while we get your operations up and running. So I would just say it's kind of tailored to the person and their personality. I think the last one that we signed, Ray Lucy, he's off the races already. I feel like it was less than a month, but he was so happy though. He called us. He was like, I got my first job. I was like, all right, sweet. When are you doing it? He's like, tomorrow. Wow, that was really quick. So, but then you have others that are, hey, I want to take a little bit more time. I want to establish myself. I want to have an office space. I want to, do things my way, but it all just comes down to the person. But I would say for Lucy, it is what she said earlier was, is the person the right fit? I think that's key for, franchise system, especially ours as a veteran exclusive franchise system. We want to make sure that they're going to fit well with others. But then also I use Lucy's perspective and the conversations that she's had with the franchisee or the prospect to match them with a mentor, someone that we believe personality wise and business mindset wise, that they would coordinate and, and model off of. So that way we can make sure that they're as successful as possible. Right.
And that leads back to our previous conversation around, is there a buddy system within the organization and the operation? Ask that question. What does that look like? Is there a partner, mentor, mentee relationship that is going to be established post agreement sign? Because that is what you really want. You need somebody not to hold your hand, but you need somebody sort of like as that first point of contact to go to in the initial months when you've got questions and you're not quite sure which way to turn.
So I know we started out asking, that transition and why veterans were kind of like a perfect fit for franchises. Is there anything else that you could think of, we've talked about the discipline, we're used to training, we're used to SOPs, we're used to just following a playbook. Is there any other personality traits or anything else that you've seen that you're like, yeah, that's why we're veteran exclusive?
We're not afraid to fail. I would add that in there. We failed and we failed again, right? And you get yelled at or chewed out for it, whatever it may be. And you get reset, right? So I think for veterans, it's okay once they realize that, oh, I made a mistake. They have that, mentorship meeting with someone else. Like, hey, you probably should have done this. And why didn't you call? Those kind of things. And those conversations kind of happen behind scenes within franchise systems. I think that right there helps set them apart, right? Because not to say that other people in life haven't failed. It's just the chance of, failure and then kind of going into your own little bubble of like, oh man, I failed and I'm not going to make it. That mentality is kind of non-existent in the veteran community for a lot of us. I just feel that they're a little bit more adaptable.
Yeah, and I feel like the fitness and somebody said earlier, what you eat today determines how you perform tomorrow. And I feel like that's very mission oriented per the military. And I know that's very trite and it's very twee. And, it's like, oh yeah, of course. But I think it's so true. It's the, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail element. And transitioning service members, veterans are used to working in that climate, in that environment, always having something working towards and always having something bigger than themselves that they are working towards. And that's what makes this opportunity a great one for our veterans.
So what are some misconceptions or things that you think people feel or think about franchises that's completely not true?
I mean, I can go first here because when I first met Jack Child, our CEO here at Veteran Service Brands, I met him about 3 years ago in a previous life, a previous role. And I thought that franchises were predatory. I didn't think they were a good fit at all for my veteran population. I was so protective. I was all about providing meaningful opportunities to transitioning service members, to veterans, one that I would put my name behind and say, yes, you know what, this is brilliant. You have to at least explore this. And I didn't even want to take his phone call to have a conversation with him. I mean, fast forward 2.5, 3 years later, here I am sat in the seat because I asked him, well, I asked Jay actually, for a job because I started working with the company and I loved the company so much. So I feel like franchises can have a bad rep in the marketplace. And I do understand why. My belief came from just an absolute place of ignorance. I didn't really know. It just was a dirty word. But the more I have learned over time, the more I feel very credible sat here in this seat discussing and talking about it as an opportunity that is very fit for purpose for a veteran who is looking to build their own legacy, essentially, their own business that they can then hand on to their family when they decide to take a step away. What about you, Jay?
I think another misconception sometimes is that, when you buy a franchise, it's just a push the play button, right? Like I could just hit the play button and the business is going to run by itself. I don't have to do anything. It's still a business. Right? At the end of the day, you still have to be immersed in it. You have to understand it and you have to spend the time to help develop it. You can't just hope that all of your leads and all the customers are just going to come flocking because you opened a franchise with the name, right? And it's got 60 locations across the United States or 150 locations or 3,000. You're still going to have to go out there and sell your business. You're still going to have to make connections with the local community, other veteran, collective groups that are in your area, VNIs, all those all those different opportunities, you still have to go make those connections, and for a lot of us, it's going out and talking to realtors, it's going out and talking to general contractors, it's going out and making a name for yourself, shaking people's hands, having breakfast, sharing coffee, getting on podcasts and just having the conversation and letting people know that you exist. Because if you sit back in your chair and you hope that business is just going to fall in your lap, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Franchise is still a business. It would be no different than you going out and starting your own business. You're just buying it with a brand name that hopefully has a good reputation behind it that's going to continue to provide jobs.
So one of my misconceptions is that then they can't make any decisions by themselves or do anything like that. It all is very regimented, and so they can't put their own little personalize it. Is that true or not?
No, actually, to be honest, I mean, yes, there's brand guidelines, right? At the end of the day, but what I think folks need to understand is we're trying to protect the logo, right? We're trying to protect that brand name and what reputation it has, right? So like for veteran service brands, it's service integrity, pride, and camaraderie, right? We want to make sure we protect those things. At the end of the day, are we going to help and assist you with your marketing campaigns and making sure that things are within brand standards and that, you're not going completely off the rails with, let's just say some weird, awkward, Facebook or Google ad. Yes, we're going to make sure that you're staying within the guidelines there. But at the end of the day, you going to a trade show and doing your own kind of marketing or your own kind of sales pitches, that's 100% okay. Typically, what we just ask is, why don't you send it to us? We'll have our team review it. We'll look it over to make sure if it's still within brand guidelines and that it's going to meet kind of the intent of what we want as far as a franchise system. I'll let Lucy take it over from here. Sorry.
No, exactly the same. I feel like I have to often reiterate and reestablish that it's your own business at the end of the day. We are providing the structure and mechanism so that you don't have to sit there on day one and go, okay, now how do I set up my website? That's done for you. Okay, how do I do my marketing? We've found best practice for the marketing. Now, if you want to circumnavigate that, okay, but we have, through lessons learned, through all the mistakes that we have made, through all of our research, found best practice. So ultimately, with the logo, with the brand, you can do more or less what you want within the guidelines. However, we have got years of experience to accelerate your growth so that you don't have to ponder those questions and do all of that research yourself. It's already been done for you, and that is what you're buying in terms of a franchise. All of that work ahead of you so that you can accelerate towards your growth and your business development and making money ultimately.
Well, I really appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us about just the process, of franchising, things to think of, the financing, kind of laying out the different fees, ways to get financing and all that. But you guys actually have veteran exclusive brands. So can you guys share your brands with us?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I'll share two of them. How about that, Lucy? Okay. And then you'll share two. There we go.
All
right. So G-Force, which is our parking lot striping franchise, started in 2017. First franchise was sold in 2018. That has just over 50 locations now across the United States. It's grown pretty rapidly, and it is an amazing brand. One thing I love about it, and it's going to apply to all brands, is they all are willing to go and help each other. That's one thing I've seen. So if let's say a location's new out of Louisiana, and this is a true fact, he's a new location. He's been there for about 4 or 5 months, and the previous location owner has drove all the way from Texas to Louisiana on multiple occasions to go help them with large projects for Amazon, other warehouse facilities, and things like that. So, and it doesn't just stop there, right? I've heard great stories about folks traveling all the way from Seattle, all the way down to Texas. I've heard folks, traveling from, Colorado all the way down to Florida to go help each other out when maybe I'm a little slow in Colorado, but in Florida, I got a lot of work and I can't get it all done. The second brand that we have is Mach 1 Epoxy Floors. So they do concrete polishing and floor epoxy, both for commercial and residential. And the same thing applies there. We got one of our guys out of Tennessee. He's probably traveled all the way up to Ohio and then all the way down to Florida to help install some floors for one of our bigger vendors, which is our customers, which is Take 5 Oil Change. So pretty exciting little brands there. 21 locations in all for Mach 1 right now. And Lucy, I'll let you take it over.
Yeah. So the third one that we have is PaintCore, which I really enjoy because it's a different mechanism. This one's what we call an owner-manager operation. So it's commercial and residential painting, but the owner of this one doesn't ever pick up a paintbrush and do the painting at all. It is subcontracted out. So it's ideal for somebody who is a great sales and marketing guru. It's a business development role. It's a project management role because you're going to be on site overseeing those subs. And then it's a great QC role as well at the end because there's the quality control, making sure that the customer is really happy. And all of our training on that one isn't around how to paint. It's about how to become exceptional in business development, how to learn the tips and the tricks. And that's all performed at our corporate location in Tampa, which is just a machine of an operation. So I love that one for somebody who wants to run their own business, but doesn't necessarily want to go out and do the work themselves. And then my favorite out of all of them is Field Ops. I am partial to that one. It's got a place in my heart. So that is sport and court markings, which, up until about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, definitely was a side hustle type of opportunity. Part-time, you could do it in your evenings, you could do it at your weekends. But with the advent of pickleball, especially in the I would say the more southern states of the USA, or the ones that have a more of a temperate year-round climate, that opportunity has exploded with growth because we are a certified reseller and installer of a great operation, which is a pickleball court in a box. And we have a lot of our locations going around the country installing those and placing those. So that's a great one. So that's Field Ops, which is the court and the sport, the field markings rather, PaintCore, which is commercial and residential painting, G-Force parking and pavement lot striping, and G-Force parking lot and pavement striping, and then Mach 1, which is the epoxy floors.
Very cool. Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much for being here today and talking with all of us about franchising. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners will too. Thanks everybody for joining us today. To Jay and Lucy from Veteran Service Brands for being here with us. If you enjoyed our conversation, make sure you hit like, subscribe, check out their website, do some other research on franchises, and let us know if there's anything else we can do to help you. Until next time, see ya.